Thanks, man. Voila, again. That's 3 introductions. I think that's a new record for me. Many, many thanks. Gracias to the organizers, Asís, Uniminuto, Nivel 7, and all the other sponsors for getting me here. It's, I've been watching the moot from a long way away for a long time, and I think it was on the screen last year, but I'd like to, it's very nice to be here. That's where I come from. This is up in the top of the world. It takes about 2 days to come here by plane, so it's quite a long trip. But it's a real pleasure to be in Colombia, and so I'm looking forward to the next couple of days and hearing what the other presentations are. But today I thought I would start with, I guess, a bit of philosophy, a lot of talking about Moodle itself and the Moodle project, with a lot of data and a lot of facts. Tomorrow there's a Q&A session and we can talk about anything else you want to talk about. But I'm going to be covering a lot of information this morning. So, but first, I just want to go back. Why do we educate? And I'd like to know here, actually, how many people here are teachers? So actually in the classroom with students. Wow, mostly, like 60, 70%. How many people here are administrators of some kind, of an institution, or some administrators? Quite a few, okay, 20 people or so. How many people here are students? You're learning some, okay, quite a few of you. All of us, I would say, probably. Are good. How many people here are in sort of more business, using Moodle in business areas? Okay, so another 20, 30 people, most of you, I guess, also, so good. But why are we educating? Why are we in this enterprise? Why are we teaching? Is it just to give people jobs so that they can be in the economy and make money and be part of the economy? Is it to make them citizens so that they're able to choose a politician when they vote? At one level, yes, but I think it's more than that. We teach because we are keeping human knowledge alive, firstly, the knowledge we've already gained as a species on the planet, and we are helping the next generation go further. We're giving them the tools to take us further. So why are we doing that? It's because of this. We found ourselves on this spaceship, and we need to work out how to survive and what we are capable of. And for me, this is the context of education that it's good to keep in mind. This is maybe too much context. That may be another time. So within education, there is a lot of details. There is details. This is a picture of a city, it's Paris, and all those people are living their lives. All those people have individual interests. It's a huge job just for us to be coordinated and survive on the planet. And there are so many details. So what I'm talking about, what I'd like to get across, is that the Moodle project is a bunch of details, but it's not just an LMS or a product. It's an engineering effort to try and improve the efficiency of how we communicate and how we educate. This kind of education, this kind of a job is, in my opinion, not something that we want to leave to a particular company, maybe supported by advertising. and so on. So it's not about the details, it's about the philosophy of what we are trying to do with education, and it's about this infrastructure that we're building. So Moodle is not the only way to learn, of course, but as a particular project, it's very important to be effective, to be open source. And it gives a lot of advantages to this idea of improving education everywhere. Open source helps collaborations. So the actual platform that we are using is itself a collaboration. Moodle is a collaboration. And also, being on the internet as it is, it enables collaborations between students, teachers, and it's about improving those collaborations. Secondly, open source gives you flexibility. You can put it into different situations and environments, and you can change it as you need to. And as was said before, what we're trying to do with Moodle is make like an operating system for education, like Linux. And Unix, which is, Linux is a Unix system. Unix is in all our devices. Almost all our devices have Unix in them. All the phones, tablets, computers, the operating systems are basically, they come from the same source. So, I want to just finish this bit talking about the mission of Moodle. So Moodle's a learning platform. It supports teachers with their teaching, and I've put that first because there are many people talking about education now without teachers. And for me, teachers are the most important thing. We have 7 billion people. We don't need to leave something as important as education simply to the learners to do it on their own. We have many, many people who are willing to teach. And good teachers are still can be the best way to learn. We love teachers at Moodle, and we're all about supporting teachers. Of course, we also want to support learners with their learning. Moodle tries to integrate everything needed for a course. So even if there are parts of the course that are not online, or even if they are all over the internet in other places, with Moodle the idea is to bring them into one place so you know what is the course, if you're going to have a course. Moodle's open in every way. It's open source. We have very open development, very open approach, open resources. But your sites can be fully private. And this is the good thing about open source, is that it helps privacy. We have a lot of people working on the security of the systems, and when you run a Moodle site, it's a private space for teachers and students to collaborate. It's not on some necessarily a place where you don't know where the data is. The data is in your control, and you choose where you want to keep that. Our mission is to keep everything for free, the software for free, and for it to work on any device. Students should not be asked to pay for an app to access the system. There should be free access. We try and be flexible. It's a flexible tool set so that it works on everything from primary schools and very small schools, all the way up to through universities and big corporations. It can scale between. And lastly, and I think this is very important, it allows everybody to contribute to global education. So we have many, many people who write code, who work on documentation, who support other people, who have businesses supporting other people, who, there's a whole ecosystem, and everyone can have input, and so the sum is greater than the parts. So, now I'll talk about what we've been working on recently. Moodle 2.7 we just released. It's obviously our latest release in a long line of releases. There's a few statistics here which you probably can't read, but there's a lot of people who've contributed to the release, and it's the work of a big community of developers and other people who help make it. So let me just talk about a few of the major features in this release. And actually, before I do, I'll ask you later this question, never mind. Let's talk about 2.7. So, one of the new features in Moodle 2.7 is a new editor. Before now, we've been using other open sources projects as our editor. So TinyMCE, and before that we had HTML We decided to make our own editor because the editor is, if you think about it, is the place where you spend most of your time in Moodle. Whether you're in a forum, replying to a forum post, or making some content, or anything you're writing, you're in the editor. And the editors that we had some deficiencies. So we decided to make our own. And the real advantage of this editor is it's very, very integrated into the Moodle system. And this allows developers to make some really interesting new features that are just simply not possible with other editors. We've also focused on accessibility, so letting the editor work on, even for people who are maybe blind, using a screen reader. And it helps them, but it also helps everybody produce content that is accessible, which is important. We've also added to it some new mathematics support. And that looks like this. It's quite simple right now, but until now it was not possible to do mathematics on every device. Our mathematics plugins in the past were Java-based, and so they only worked on desktop computers. Java doesn't work on tablets, on phones, and so on. But now with the new system, it works everywhere for entering mathematics. It looks beautiful because we've also changed how the mathematics is shown on the screen using something called MathJax. And it's much easier now to do mathematics for every subject, everywhere throughout Moodle. We also have done work on our conditional activities, and in Moodle that's the feature that says you can't do this until you've done something else. Now we've added features for more Boolean control, so you can say, to do this thing, you must have got 80% in this quiz, and finished this assignment, and looked at this document, or you've got a score in something else, etc. You can make complicated scenarios if you want to. But even if you're using simple rules, it's still much easier to make them now and see them, so the interface was improved. We've also been working on the general look of Moodle, the usability of Moodle over the past couple of years, and I mean, I know as much as anybody all the problems of Moodle in the past, and it often gets criticism over the past years for it looking old-fashioned, and we all look at many, many nice apps and websites all the time, and it was more difficult to make Moodle look beautiful in the past. But now with the last couple of releases, we're changing a lot of the display in Moodle. We're using a bootstrap framework, which designers like, and it makes the interface more accessible, more responsive. So the same design works from desktops, tablets, phones, and everything scales accordingly. And so now in 2.7 for the first time, this new way of theming the interface is default. It's the main way of showing Moodle now. So the old themes are becoming deprecated. They'll still work for a while, but if you have a Moodle site and you're moving to Moodle 2.5 or 2.7, you should look at doing it under this framework. It's better for all your students. This theme itself is a nice example for themers, so it's quite easy to make a new theme based on this. We also had an example of a theme, a little bit extended from that is called More. It's a clean, simple theme, but it lets the administrator add colours and backgrounds very simply. So you don't need to edit any code, you do it all inside the Moodle interface. And this is useful for small Moodle sites. I'm not saying a university would do this for their theme, but if you have a small Moodle site, then it's very, very quick to make it look nice. And in my office, in the Moodle office back in Perth, have a lot of developers around, and when I pass them and I can see their screens, because they all have many Moodle sites for testing and development, they're using this just to make them look nicer, and it's a much nicer way to work on a theme that looks better. So, yeah, there's a lot of nice things there. But again, these are just examples, and the community are producing new themes based on these all the time now. So I think there's no excuse for saying Moodle can't look beautiful anymore. It sounds like the translator's keeping up very well. I'm impressed. We've done work on the assignments. The online texts now can have word limits that can be graded inline. So you can, if students put a text in, you can comment inside directly in the text. Hopefully some of you are on 2.6 or have been using 2.6, where we have this quite sophisticated assignment grading. So if the student submits a PDF, you can draw all over it and make comments, and it's really good. But this was just a bit extra in 2.7. There's more control over notifications, there's better permissions, just refining the assignment, which is kind of an important module. There's improvements on the quiz. It's better now when creating questions. There's better reports now of quizzes, a few changes like that. Some of the biggest work, though, in 2.7 is aiming towards our analytics. So in this version of Moodle, we have a completely new way of logging data. So every time a person does something, so they look at a page or they submit an assignment, this causes an action, and this action causes some information about that action to be saved into the log. Moodle has always done that. But now the log can be a number of systems. We have plugins. So very big sites will probably want to push their logs into a separate system. And with that data because there's a lot of it, imagine in a university situation with many people doing many things, there's a lot of data. And this can go into a separate database for analysis. Moodle itself can also read from that database, and we can have reports in Moodle that are processing this data for analytics for other reports. So the process here was a new system which lets large Moodle sites scale, but also we're recording more events than we were before. And we have a page in Moodle which lists all the events that are being recorded. So if you're looking at the logs, you can now understand exactly what they all mean and what all those events are. And this sort of collection of data is an important first step towards many other things which I'll talk about later. Since Moodle 2.6, we've added mobile notifications. There is another open source system which was developed by one of our developers called Air Notifier. It's another open source system you install. Moodle sites can communicate to this with messages, and the messages are sent to Google or Apple, and very shortly also Microsoft. And then those messages are sent to the phones. That's how you get notifications on phones and mobile devices. And we now have this working really well in Moodle 2.7. So I get messages all the time on my phone from what's happening on our main website, moodle.org. And you can too, if you want to. This is a bit of an old screenshot, but it shows the mobile app with a notification coming up. It looks nicer now, but it does work. In the latest version of the app, you can reply to those messages. If they're messages from people, you can send messages back from the app, etc. Speaking of mobile, we've added a new plugin to our plugins database, which you can install on your Moodle site. It gives your Moodle site full compatibility with the latest app. So even if you're on Moodle 2.4 or 2.5, 2.6, you will have the latest compatibility with the app, which is good if your students and staff are using our mobile app. So that's a new thing. And lastly, for the system, I didn't ask, are there any system administrators here? People who do more of the technical back-end stuff. A couple here, a few here. Well, this will interest you. 2.7 has a new support for scheduled tasks. It's very much like cron on Unix. And you can say, these things should happen at this time exactly. So you can specify background tasks to happen exactly when you want them to. The last thing I want to talk about for 2.7 is that it is a long-term support release. And this is how the support has looked for the last few years. 1.9 was the last time we had a long-term support release. We supported it for 4 years or so, quite a long time, but we don't anymore. How many people are on 1.9? Anyone? 1.9? Still? Okay. How many on 2.0? There's about 5 people, I think. 2.0? Don't be embarrassed. 2.1? I'm just very interested to see this statistics. A few people. 2.2? 2.3? 5, 6 people. 2.4? Again, 5, 6. 2.5? A few more, well, quite a few, probably 20 people, 30 people. 2.6, another 20, 30 people. 2.7, bravo. Great. 2.8, anyone? Not yet. Well, look, the upgrading from Moodle 1.9 to anything can be difficult. And that's because we made a decision, I made the decision that a lot of things that we had said throughout Moodle 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, we said, these are big things we need to change. I said later. We got to 2.0, I said, it's probably a nice time. Let's do all of those things at the same time. And that makes it a big jump. And the upgrade, a lot of people have trouble. Not everybody, but some. And I know it's a difficult upgrade, but I just say it's worth it. Climb up the stairway to heaven with us, because the later releases it's getting really good. And I would love you all to be up with us on some recent releases. And just to finish, 2.7 is a long-term support release because I'm trying to encourage people to come to 2.7 at least. If you have to stay for a while, stay on 2.7, right? What are we working on now? So the roadmap that we have breaks into these 5 major areas. So the first one is analytics and feedback. I'm going to explain all these in some detail soon. The second one, management stuff. The third one is community, open content. The fourth one is access, so how we access the systems. And finally, in the middle, the most important one is Moodle as a platform and improving that. So I'll quickly go through these. Let me start with the platform. Just some of the things that have been happening recently that you might not have known about. We obviously have a Moodle plugins database on moodle.org where developers from around the world who have created plugins publish them to the community. We now have a person dedicated to this system. We didn't before. And this David Mudrak is our new developer liaison. He manages the system and he's improving the system with reviews, ratings, quality assurance, automated and human. And that's to make this a much more, what is already, but even more reliable source for getting new functionality to plug into Moodle. This is a bit technical, but Moodle 2.8, which is in progress, we're working on something called an element library. This is for developers to, when they're making pages, new pages in Moodle, they can construct them like with Lego blocks of content. And this makes it easier for developers to create pages, but it also means more consistency. It helps the people making themes, and it's sort of a technical back-end thing, but it will, in the future, make Moodle look better and better. For 2.8 now, we're working on gradebook improvements. Actually, this is the biggest feature in 2.8. We had a workshop with a number of universities in Long Beach, California in June. We also had some big surveys. These were all in English, and so, which is unfortunate. We need to work on this problem, and I'll talk about that too in a minute. But we had a lot of surveys. 80% of people just wanted more usability of the gradebook for grades than necessarily new features. But we identified a lot of work, and we're spending 6 whole weeks. My whole team for 6 weeks are working on the gradebook. This is just a screenshot of one thing, and it's I can't show you on this iPad how it looks, but it's just like a spreadsheet. It makes it a full screen with columns on the side and on the top, which stay still, and the middle part scrolls like a spreadsheet, just as you expect, like Google Docs or these sorts of things. There's also a lot of other things happening. We're working on a new way of weighting grades, which is more natural. We call it natural weighting. It's more intuitive. That'll make it easier for teachers. We're changing the terminology to make it easy to understand. We're simplifying the configuration of grade books so that teachers have less things to be confused with. We're improving scales and letters. So you'll be able to grade people using letters if you want. So you can type a B or a C, and that will be converted to a number inside the grade book. There's also a grade history report, so you can see the history of grades changing. And this is useful in a big class where maybe you have 10 people changing grades at once, and you see something change and you don't know why. So you'll be able to look back through the history and see this person changed this thing, and so on. So there's a lot of gradebook improvements, and that's going to be the major thing for 2.8. That'll help a lot of teachers, I think, and students. We're also working on a lot of overall navigation. The navigation block in Moodle can get long and complex, but we are breaking up some of that functionality into natural places on the interface so that it just works more as you would expect. One of the examples is this. So on the top of the screen, you'll have your user menu, which is just your user stuff. We're all used to that from many internet sites. So Moodle will have this functionality there by default. And you can have everything for the current user will be in this state. It's a very small thing, but to do it properly is quite a lot of work because it needs changes all through Moodle code. More events, as I was talking about before with the logging, we're going to log more and more things. So we have more detail about what everybody is doing inside the Moodle site. The next thing I want to talk about is management and the management of learning. We have a system coming in soon. It should be in Moodle 2.8. I'll just remind you, when I'm talking about Moodle 2.8, this comes out in November. We have releases every May and November. We work on a lot of things, but because we have fixed release dates, if things are not ready, well, they have to wait till the next release. So I can't guarantee everything will be in 2.8, but we're working hard on these things. The outcomes and competencies is about collecting information about people's performance in very small things, so in a graded assignment, perhaps, and maybe just one criteria of a rubric. And collecting that information and making it up to eventually having competencies so that you can say, this person can do something, and here's the evidence where they've shown they can do those things. This also needs to be connected with learning plans, so you have a list of things that the student needs to do. These are the things they know, these are the things they still have to learn, and the whole flow of their working through competencies. The workflow part is about some notion in Moodle that sometimes decisions need to be made with different people. So sometimes a student might say, I want to learn this, and their manager or a teacher needs to say, yes, okay, you can, and then it goes back and they're able to. So workflows. Organisation structure is another thing that this is connected to. In Moodle, you have roles, teachers, students, etc. But there's no structure. We don't say, this person is the manager for these people. And lastly, reporting. We need a lot of reporting. People need different reports. And that's another thing that we're actually tackling right now too, which is this. So this is being worked on right now. It's a report builder. It's a tool that lets you build reports by pulling data from this plugin, from this plugin, from this part of Moodle, and combining them into reports. So we have a new central system that defines the data, it exposes the data from various areas, and then you can combine it into new reports. Okay, that's some things. Let me talk about access a bit. Right now there's work going on in the forum, which the forum has not changed really very much since Moodle 1. But there's some good work happening now. We've just added discussion subscriptions, which look a bit like this. It's very tiny, little tiny icons around the place, but you can now subscribe to individual discussions, not necessarily whole forums. That's a picture of me in Barcelona with an iPad on my face. So these sorts of little things. Just now, where the feature is coming in to 2.8 of being able to reply by email. So if the administrator configures a mailbox with the Moodle site, Moodle will be able to securely receive email from students and teachers and put that and act on the content. So if you get a post from a forum that comes into your email, you can just hit reply and it goes back into Moodle and it goes straight into the forum. There's a lot of security around that, as you can imagine, but it's a good solution. I'm really happy to see this. I've wanted that feature for about 10 years, so I'm glad we're finally getting it. There's also work on usability and accessibility of the interface. Anonymity is another feature coming up, and grading of forum posts. The mobile app is getting a lot of work. There is a session later on where Jordi Vila will be talking about that, so I'm not going to say much now. But there is a lot of work happening with us in the app. Some of the things are grades support, being able to view forums there, viewing assignments and also grading the assignments, and yeah, this sort of thing. And we're also working on a Firefox version. Very soon there's also a Windows mobile version coming too. So the app will be on 4 platforms. The app itself is an open source project. It works closely with Moodle, but it's a separate project under an open source license. And we're building the community of people around this app to make it better and better. The next part I want to talk about is the analytics and feedback. So I already talked about the new logging and the events and the things that we're now recording inside Moodle. We're gathering the data. So now it's time to look at how we use that data. And there may be other people talking about sessions on this too, I hope, this next 2 days. One of the things we're doing is a very small, we're starting with a small analytics project which is called the event notifications. And what it does is it's a plugin in Moodle, a report that looks for events and will send notifications. And you can program it inside the Moodle interface. So a teacher can say, if there are more than 5 forum posts within half an hour, some window of half an hour, then send me a message. And of course that message can arrive on your phone. So the teacher can know, there's a lot of activity happening in my course in this place. And so they know to go there and join in with the conversation, perhaps. This is just a start. If you want to play with this, you can on prototype.moodle.net. That's where we put prototypes of new software. And yeah, it's an interesting start. But I think in the future, we're going to have a lot more of these kinds of things from Moodle. And not just from Moodle, not from just my Moodle HQ, but from the community developing plugins that do these kinds of things. We also have a research interest. Moodle is very much based on research internally. There is a website we have called research.moodle.net, which lists a lot of the papers that have been published at our Moodle Research Conference. And this happens roughly once a year. The last one was in Tunisia in last September, I think it was. And this is a research conference, so we have full papers with peer reviews, and we want to encourage people to be doing research on their Moodle instances. Here are some of the sort of questions that you might want to, these are my sort of questions that I have in online learning. The things that we could be answering by studying what we are doing with Moodle and how students and teachers are interacting. So firstly, what are the ethical concerns like privacy? And how can we address that? If we're collecting big data, we need to also be very careful how we use that, who sees it, and how it gets used. Should we analyze the text? Is it ethical to analyze the text of what people are writing? If they write a forum post, should we look into it with computers and look for meaning in there? These are all open questions. You may have answers, and we can discuss them. How should teachers be alerted? What sort of things should teachers be informed about so we can notify them? I just mentioned one little project we started, but I'm sure we can do a lot more. The good education relies on feedback. Most of it is feedback, loops of feedback. If you're learning something, say you're learning a language, and you say the word wrong, as I'm doing a lot in this country this week, it really helps for someone to give you feedback immediately. Oh, no, it's not buenos dias, it's buenos dias. Correct. So if I have that feedback straight away, my brain is already active. My synapses are active on this idea, and the feedback corrects the connections straight away. The tighter we can make feedback between teachers and students, and between students and students, and between teachers and teachers, the better for everything. So a lot of this is about notifications and how do we tell people on their devices that they need to be involved now. What are the best motivators? What sort of feedback is the best motivation for students? You can be told about a lot of things, but not all of it will be motivating. And we have to work on motivating students and teachers. So gamification is one thing, and I think Fernando's talking later about that. There's badges. We have badges in Moodle, as you know. Maybe there's ranks in class. We have rank reports so you can see where you are in the class. But there's many sorts of feedback we can imagine. But which ones are best for motivation? For example, giving points to students or badges. In the psychology area, there's two opinions. One says, yes, it's good, it's motivating, and really, I've seen how motivating it can be. On the other hand, other people say this external motivation doesn't help with learning to love the subject you're meant to be learning. It's extra. You're spending a lot of time trying to win badges, and you're not enjoying the mathematics itself or the science or whatever it is you're supposed to be learning, and you're not getting that love for the subject that really we should be trying to give people. So, these are all open questions and very interesting, and we can be studying them. How can we put students together in groups to learn from each other? Or what's the best way? Should they be equal ability? Should we mix the good students with the bad students? And we can be doing some of this online automatically. Moodle could be automatically doing these things and helping teachers. And lastly, how can we, if we have all these notifications, how can we keep them at a good level? How can we have maybe a slider bar and you say, I want more or less, and these sorts of things. A few more ideas for research. We had some ideas at the last research conference looking at A/B testing, a very simple research technique. And for example, is it better to reveal all the activities at the beginning, or is it better to release them slowly? No answer. Is it better to have repeating patterns every week, or is it better to have no patterns? Is it better to have, I'll skip a few, the middle one. So initiators are people who start conversations, and repliers are people who always reply to conversations, and lurkers are people who don't really get involved, but they're reading everything, but they're not getting involved. So if we can identify different people as being one of those three kinds by looking at their data, does this give us any advanced information on how well they are going to do in the course? Don't know, maybe. So these are the sorts of things I think as a community people can be doing. If you're interested in any of that, come to research.moodle.net, start discussions in Spanish, and try and connect with people because, and you may even want to come to the next research conference, which may be in Europe, but I think we should have one in South America because that'll give me an excuse to come here again. But it would be nice to see some large-scale studies because if we can answer those sorts of questions by looking at our online courses, we can find some truth from the universe about us, and we can make the software better. We can make the software help teachers by supporting them and helping them do the right things that help students. So, okay. Last thing I want to talk about is open content. We have Moodle.org, of course, is the open community website. I hope you've noticed when you go there, it should be coming up in Spanish automatically, and you should be seeing the Spanish forums on the front page. And we're trying to make it very international. If there are anything missing, see if you can help fix it. But we're trying to make it a very international, open community support place. And it looks a bit better now too, because I must say for the past few years, I have not even wanted to look at that site because it looked so bad. At least now it looks a lot nicer too. Something we did last year was we ran a MOOC on Moodle. It ran for 4 weeks. It was called Learn Moodle. It was for new teachers to learn Moodle. We had 9,600 people enrolled from 200 countries. 3,200 actually participated, which means they did at least one activity. 638 people completed everything. Along the way, people made 2,646 practice courses, because we let anybody create new courses, and there were 4,500 forum discussions in all different languages. So I think one of the aims of this we actually achieved, which was to show that you can run a large MOOC on Moodle. Because to me a MOOC is just a very large online course, and I think the activities and the depth of Moodle is far greater than most of the so-called dedicated MOOC platforms that have been coming up in the last couple of years. They're very simple compared to Moodle. Moodle has more depth. We also learned from doing that some of the things that we could fix to make it easier to handle very large numbers, and some of those fixes have gone into Moodle. And finally, it was a nice chance for us to practice running a MOOC as an activity for our people in my company to try that. Because actually, remember, we're developing software. We don't really get a lot of time to just run a course. And we all love doing that. So that was a really nice thing. This model's been duplicated. It was run recently in Italian and had quite a lot of people participating in Italian. And I hope to see it in Spanish soon too, and other languages to be translated and run just everywhere. So, good thing. We also, still talking about open resources and websites, we have Moodle.net, which is a place for sharing content. There's two ways you can do that. The first is you can simply advertise that you have a course. So maybe you are running a MOOC or some open course on a website somewhere. You can publish the link here. And we're going to improve this site a lot to make it more attractive so that students can browse and look for different courses that are happening all around the world and when they start and choose to go to them. The second way you can share here is by uploading whole courses. If you want to share a course under the Creative Commons license, this is where you do it. And you can also share parts of courses. So maybe one activity, maybe one glossary, or one book or something like that. So we're working on this a lot now. I think it's going to have a big new look pretty soon. But this is Moodle's open educational resource. We also do things in the community. We're very open. This was just a little example of, there was a Linux magazine who had a hacking challenge to see if people could hack into Moodle, and they offered a prize. Nobody won the prize, so that's good. Moodle Moots. We're at a Moodle Moot. You already know what they are. Moodle is a very interesting topic for a conference because it has so many different facets. It's a piece of software, of course. There are technical things. There are also pedagogical things, and they're always connected. And then there's also the financial part of Moodle. With people are discussing how best to do something and different ways of solving problems. But ultimately, and most moots are user conferences, so they're about users speaking and presenting to each other and learning from each other, which is really, really good. And as you know, there are moots everywhere around the world. Every week there's something somewhere. I don't go to all of them, otherwise I would never get any work done. But there is a lot of them. But what I want to do is I want to improve the connection between the developers and the users. And so I've made a decision to start actually actively running Moodle Moots. Before now, I haven't run a single Moodle Moot, never. It's always the community creates them. But for the first time, Moodle HQ is going to start running some Moots. The first one is in, I've got some things. What's going on here? So the first one is going to be in Australia, which is easy for me. It's in Melbourne. That's very hard for you. The features of this Moot are we're going to be focusing on particular sectors, and there will be particular days for particular sectors. University, VET is vocational training. It's like learning to be a plumber or these sort of trades. health sector, K-12 is schools, and workplace is everything in the workplace. We're going to make fewer choices. Most Moodle moots, and I think this is a good exception, but most other Moodle moots will have 5 or 6 things happening at one time. And I really hate that because I only ever get to see like 15 or 20% of the actual what's happening. You know, I want to see everything. So I really like fewer choices. I like maybe two things happening at once. So we'll be doing that. We plan to make very professional recordings of these. So I'm sure maybe you're aware of TED Talks, for example. So I would like them to be more like that. Very large rooms of people, lots of cameras, very high quality production, and they go on the internet straight away. And we'll build over many Moodle moots a library of these presentations. But finally, this is the most important thing, there will be lots of design brainstorming sessions for designing Moodle. So we'll take an aspect of Moodle, let's say, exactly as we did recently with the gradebook. We said, let's all look at the gradebook. Let's look at all the ideas that are in the community, all the solutions people have come up with, all the problems that are happening, and let's have a big organised brainstorming session for a few hours, where at the end, we come to a decision that these are the things we want. And then I can give that to my developers and we'll make it happen. We already do this in a small way, in many ways in the community, but this will be, I think, the first time we have such a big, concentrated attack on these things, and I think it will really help Moodle. Nice food and drinks, hopefully. So, yeah, this slide is from when I announced this in Australia just recently. So, yeah, it'll be in July 6th, 9th in Melbourne. But we also plan to have the same sort of thing happening in the US next year. The location and the exact time are not announced yet. And I would like to see one in South America also. So maybe Colombia. There's been no discussions on this yet, so it's very open. But I think it would be nice to have a moot like that somewhere close to here. And we can look for, kind of make it a big conference. So all of this stuff that I've just talked about is managed by my company. So the Moodle company is in Perth. We have some people who are in various countries as well, but there's 30 people. Our basic structure is we manage the contributions that are coming in from institutions, Moodle partners, and others. They go into our teams. We have a front-end team who focus on how Moodle looks and works from a user perspective. And we have a back-end team that focuses on the performance, the structure, the platform, and the other things. And we have another team, which is the integration team, that takes all of that, and then every week they review very tightly. We have many, many reviews. But that work all gets distilled and put into Moodle for ending up eventually into a release. Now 30 people is not a very large number. Really, to do everything we want to do, we would need a lot more. So we have been growing, but at a regular rate. But there's a lot more I want to do, a lot of things. So I just wanted to mention that the Moodle partner system that we have is what pays for all of that. We are open source. The source is free, the code is free, and it always will be. But the people who work on it obviously need to live and have families and houses. So the way we are supported is through Moodle partners. So Nivel 7 is our Colombian Moodle partner, and they support the project directly by a percentage of their earnings goes straight to the Moodle project. We have about 54 or so partners around the world who do similar things. But so I just wanted to end with, if you ever have a need for help with the Moodle site, if you need support, that sort of thing, then you should talk to a Moodle partner rather than someone else, because Moodle partners will help the project, and it's part of the whole system. And that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. So I have some time for questions, ideas, and thank you very much. Any? Pleasure. Any questions? I have a headset.
Preguntas, por favor, levantan la mano.
And we'll have more tomorrow too, I believe.
Good morning. My name is Andres Franco. I'm from Oxford ELT Systems. I have one question. It's about, we will be able to have Moodle 2.7 for a long time, you know. At the same time, we will have 2.8 with some improvements. My question is, we need to move 2.7 to 2.8 to have those improvements, or we will have those in 2.7 also?
Yes, the only way we can release new features is, well, most of the way we can release new features is through a new release. That's what it's for. We will never have the 1.9 to 2.0 difficult upgrade again. Right? We focus on making them very incremental now. Upgrades are much easier and getting more easy. So there is not a big, it's not very hard to go to 2.8. The only other way you can add functionality to 2.7 is by adding plugins. And so that's why we have this, the developers producing plugins, and you can add a lot of features and things to 2.7. But yes, it's impossible to get new features without upgrading. It's just the nature of software, generally, yeah.
Hi, my name is Germán Gallego from Universidad Autónoma Occidente. Today, many educational institutions are working with their evaluation system under the item response theory. This is setting used for the PISA test. PISA, you know the PISA test?
No, sorry, I'm not understanding. It's what test?
It's a PISA test. It's
PISA.
PISA. I don't know in English. Somebody knows?
No, okay.
This consists of building questions from proficiency levels, which are validated from the student responses. So my question is, Moodle has working in this methodology, or?
So I think you're talking about a more interactive quiz that adapts, an adaptive quiz.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Moodle standard quiz has some features like that, but not much. But Moodle is a platform, and if you have a particular idea for quizzes, you can develop it. I'm not saying you should, but there may be a lot of people who want that feature. They should get together and make a plugin that implements that feature. Or, if you see how to add that functionality to the current quiz, you should make a proposal in our Moodle.org, and maybe it's not very difficult to give the additional features onto the quiz we have. And the current maintainer of the quiz is Tim Hunt. He's at the Open University in the UK. If he gets a good proposal, he'll most likely implement it in the quiz. It depends on how hard it is. But I'm not, you know, I think there are many ways to do adaptive quizzes, so it needs to be a detailed proposal to explain this particular methodology that you're talking about. Yep.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Silver Darío Sasa. Buenos días, mi nombre es Silver Darío Sasa, soy docente de Uniminuto. Escuché con gran alegría el editor de texto ATO, sobre todo en la parte de pues que se piensa mucho en las personas invidentes o con poca visibilidad. Mi pregunta un poquito más hacia el futuro y es, ¿han pensado en desarrollar algunas estrategias, algunas herramientas para estudiantes con limitaciones a nivel cognitivo?
Yes, so that is something that gets discussed. It's, we have a Moodle accessibility group that discusses accessibility, and it has some experts. We are trying to identify the things in Moodle that are the biggest problems and fixing them as we go. You can never say a system is 100% accessible. It's impossible. Accessibility is a process, and even if Moodle was 100% accessible, the very first teacher who puts in a tiny image or the wrong image to explain a concept will cause a problem for a student with cognitive disabilities. So everyone needs to work together, the teachers, the software, to make that happen. But it's an ongoing process of education. We have, in the past, fixed certain icons that we had to make them clearer for people who might not understand. I mean, that helps everybody as well. But there was some specific things I remember about that. Yeah. But yes, we do think about it. Thank you. So, yeah.
Hi, good morning. My name is Juan Camilo Lovera from Virtual Lab. I have a question. Why don't you consider to change Moodle as a cloud service? I think that it will help the customers to have every time the last version of the service.
Well, you can already. So Moodle is an open source platform. That's like saying, why not make Linux a cloud service? Of course, many cloud services are built on Linux. Moodle partners, when they do hosting, they are in fact providing a cloud service of Moodle. So one of the advantages of using a company like that is that they will give you this exact thing. They will give you a cloud service, if that's what you want. But not everybody should be forced to do that, right? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Daniel, and I want to ask you something about usability. You said you are working in that topic, and my question is, you can change the appearance of Moodle through themes. Is it possible to add a feature to change workflows? Because sometimes you can change how it looks, but maybe the steps to achieve any activity could be too large or too big. So it is a way to start to make some improvements in that feature.
Yeah. Firstly, do you mean to allow an administrator to change their workflow for their site, or do you mean that we should change it for everybody?
What I imagine is something like you can have, like you have seen the workflows, or for example Google Analytics, when you have the pages and the steps that the people run to achieve something.
Right.
What I want is like a page for the admin to set, okay, if I want to finish a quiz, I only want to ask one time to the user, you want to do it now, or you want to finish the quiz now? So you can say, okay, I want to ask to us in the first page and at the end of the quiz. But maybe for some people it's too large, the process, so they want to remove those steps and just, okay, you want to present a quiz, ask, resolve the exam, and just click in submit.
Yeah.
That's what I mean and what I...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Yes. Well, two things there. One is, it's important to work on a system together for usability in general. If we had a system that allowed every site to change things like that, this Moodle would not look like this Moodle, and they would all be very different. And so the usability between Moodle sites would drop, because you'd have to relearn things, right? But if we're talking about just fixing Moodle itself in a particular area, to add some options or to improve workflow and so on, that's a feature suggestion And the way you should approach that is to, again, make a proposal, a specification, and give it to us through Moodle.org. In the tracker, we have the Moodle tracker. And so you would suggest this as a feature idea, try and gather community around it, so other people to vote on the issue, or to comment, or to refine it. And once this idea has a lot of people who want it, we will implement it. And then everybody will get that change.
Bueno,
Yep. So.
mañana vamos a tener una sesión de solo de preguntas con Martin, creo que va a durar como 1 hora y media, entonces los invitamos a un refrigerio para poder continuar con todas las conferencias y pues bueno, muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Por favor,
We'll see you
no-
around.
Por favor, por favor, por favor, por favor.